animators and artists. Rikke Asbjoern and Chris Garbutt are the co-creators of Pinky Malinky, as well as the upcoming Netflix interactive special, We Lost Our Human. As cartoonists with experience in storyboarding, writing, directing for television, we invited Rikke and Chris onto our live stream to discuss what it was like to develop an interactive production and what they learned along the way. So welcome to the stream, Rikke and Chris.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
We're so excited to talk to you about the special. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome our audience. This is a live stream interview, which means that you can interact with us by asking questions about the process behind We Lost Our Human, and I might just ask your questions on the air. So to begin, Chris and Rikke, what was your role on We Lost Our Human, and how would you describe a typical day during this project's development and production?
That's a big question.
Do you want to start?
Well, we came up with the idea, so we're the co-creators and
executive producers,
writers,
directors. I also art directed and Rikke voice directed on the project.
Yeah, so quite a few hats.
Yeah, a bit of everything. And
right.
I guess you want to know about the process, like a day by day, what we were doing on the project.
Yeah, and I know that that is a really big question given your scope on the project. So maybe if we split this into first pre-production and how this was developed, development, then pre-production, then production might be the best way to go about this.
So in regards to development, obviously that started out with pitching the project. So we went into Netflix with a handful of the projects that we wanted to make, two of them being interactive, and this one, We Lost Our Human, immediately kind of popped for the execs that we were pitching them to. And from there, they eventually brought us in to start development on the project.
I think the first pitch we did was literally a one-page pitch for this idea. And because of the title of this project, it just really stood out. And then I think we did one more pitch where we
kind of expanded on the idea and
went all out. And
exactly.
Like 3 whole pages. And then we kind of just got going after that.
Yeah, and the first, obviously this is an interactive, branching narrative project. So similar to like the Choose Your Own Adventure books, it has a storyline that can go in many, many different directions. So the first thing we had to do when we came into development was kind of, all right, how are we going to figure out the story of this, the story that has kind of multiple paths? So the very first thing we did was create like a golden path outline, which is one kind of single linear outline from beginning, middle to the end, and kind of have that approved in-house. And then from there, we could kind of start to expand in many different directions from that solid spine that we had with like the golden path outline.
Yeah, starting in a very traditional way with just figuring out our one story, and then
and we can actually show you some of that writing process here. So this is a photograph of that golden path outline with our cat Teddy having a good read. And then basically, like we said, we took that outline once it had been approved, and we had a writing room in a Netflix, and we stuck that on the boards using Post-it notes, just like single kind of linear path through. And then this is the result of what happened once we started to kind of branch out in many different directions.
This is quite a few months down the line.
Yeah.
So just imagine all of these boards completely empty with just one little Post-it note at the beginning, and we were all looking at each other going, all right, let's go.
Yeah. How do we do this? Yeah. And we've never done an interactive project before. Like, we only worked in kind of linear storytelling and filmmaking. So we had to kind of figure it out ourselves as to how we were going to approach this. And thankfully, it seemed to work. We eventually did get some narrative design consultants on board as well, who worked in like video games and stuff like that, to help us kind of understand the specific needs of a project like this compared to a linear kind of project. So that was super, super helpful. But a lot of this we had to kind of figure out ourselves.
And we figured that by keeping it up on the wall, we could keep an overview of everything.
Yeah.
So that's why it was up there for best part of 8 months,
Exactly.
really, while we were just going through it over and over and over. Like you said, getting consultants in just to make sure, okay, this seems fun to us, but is it actually, does it seem good to people who have experience doing it? Or will it be frustrating and annoying?
And I mean,
just asking people who have been through that.
Exactly.
Are we messing this up, or are we are we on the right path?
An interactive project it has different demands from the audience because there is that level of interaction. It's not passive viewing; you're actually getting involved. So from what we've kind of learned, like the audience has different expectations, so it's trying to kind of deliver upon those as well. And in the story room, we did come up with stuff that we wanted to stick to throughout this, like trying to deliver so there's no kind of bad paths and no dead ends. And bad paths means stuff that is kind of frustrating. Like there's no repetition.
There's no you go left and you die.
Yeah, exactly.
Like in the books that we
no
suffer
punishment through. And trying to pay off everything and kind of reward every choice. And I mean, a lot of this mantra came. Like we were lucky that at the start of this production, Bandersnatch came out on Netflix, which is obviously a very similar kind of format with the choices that come on screen and everything. So we learned from that what we wanted to do with ours, because I mean, Bandersnatch, it's Black Mirror, it's got a very different expectation from the audience where it is messing with you. It's purposefully kind of frustrating you with the choices, the purposeful repetition. It's part of the storytelling and it works really, really well. But for what we were doing and the kind of audience that we'd be going for, it was a completely different thing that we need to be delivering. So that's kind of how we crafted this sort of mantra for the story. Right?
Well, we got a lot of good inspiration from like how they did the smooth choice points and everything just played so nicely, and we're like, we want to try and do that in animation because we want to try and avoid that like stop-start feeling. You really want everything to. I mean, I think we looked at each other and like, we want this to feel like a feature.
Yeah, with a narrative that's not interrupted by the choices we made. It just keeps flowing. And
then it's just that fun part along the way where you actually get to steer the ship a little bit, but we still want it to feel like epic and
So just to give you a bit of kind of an idea of how we sort of approached it when it came to building the interactive story. Like this is a very, very simple breakdown of kind of how Act 2, kind of the main beats in Act 1, the main beats in Act 1. So this is kind of the stuff that we knew we needed to hit. And then we basically kind of, as we showed in the previous slide, kind of put them up on the boards like this using Post-it notes. All of the little yellow kind of Post-its, those are the choice points. So those are the things that come on the screen and kind of give you the choice of what you want to do. And
they're kind of spaced out in a specific way as well, because that's also part of an interactive, but you don't want to, there's a certain amount of time that you want in between each choice, so people don't put the remote down and kind of get complacent.
Yeah, I guess at this point we should actually say what the project is about, because that might help give context for what we're talking about. But I mean, basically, We Lost Our Human is about an indoor cat and dog, like Pudding and Ham, who wake up one morning to find that their owner is missing and soon discover that all humans have disappeared off the planet. So the adventure follows Pudding and Ham basically going out into the big wide world and trying to find their human. And it escalates from there into a big, crazy, multi-dimensional, universe-saving adventure that's kind of epic and stupid and silly. So yeah, that thing at the end here, this is kind of something that we worked into the story where there's actually, you're given the choice at the end of Act 1 if you want to follow Ham or Pud's story. Like there's a choice there where they kind of take the lead in the story, if you like. So it's almost like the eternal question of if you're a cat person or a dog person is kind of brought up at the end of Act 1.
Which is going to get really interesting. I can't wait for all the arguments online about who's going to win.
So yeah, just to give you a sense of the scale from this as well. So basically, yeah, you've got like Act 1, 2A, 2B, and Act 3 kind of spread across these boards here.
Oh, wow.
the ham, and then you have a similar thing that occurred here. This is actually an earlier version of the story, which was cut down a bit of what we've ended up with. Because basically we kind of worked out that this would have been about 400 minutes worth of original animation. We cut it down to 200 minutes worth. But it's still massive. I mean, I think we were talking earlier.
That's like, a feature.
Yeah, it's a few features.
Yeah.
Because the actual post minutes that we ended up with was 430 minutes of post. So with all of the kind of reuse and kind of slightly adjusted scenes, and we did some stuff in-house, and there's lots of stuff that kind of just exploded the amount of content, basically. So yeah, that kind of gives you a little sense, like I said, the scale, and then at the end you've got all the kind of multiple, many endings. So yeah, that's kind of an oversight of how it started and how the kind of writing process developed once we were just figuring it out along the way. And then this thing here that I was going to show you is the re-engagement strategy. So basically, I mean, going back to this slide, obviously there's a lot of content, a lot of animation that's been made for this. And with an interactive story, with like a choose your own adventure style story, you could basically follow one path and get to the end and miss a lot of content. So this is something that we talked a lot about at Netflix. It's like, all right, we're going to be spending a lot of money on all of this content. How do we try and ensure that the audience is going to see as much of it as possible? So
without it being repetitive.
Yeah.
Feeling like you have to start all over again. So how can we do it in an organic way where you just kind of get to experience it?
And that was a big thing for us, like avoiding the repetition. So we kind of sat down and tried to problem solve on that, and we came up with an idea for like a re-engagement strategy where once you get to a certain ending, you're basically given the choice to go back into the story at a place that you've never been and continue on with the story, because the first ending that you get to isn't the ultimate ending. It's a satisfying, fun kind of end to that particular narrative, but there's still more to go, if you like. So that was an important part of it, to kind of convince Netflix that this is definitely worth the investment, because we can make sure that the audience is going to go back and then see as much of the content as possible. So yeah, this is like what we added at the end was basically like 3 the engagement episodes, where once you get to an ending, you experience something that then gives you a choice to go back in to enjoy even more of the story. So yeah, there you go. That's the challenging but very, very fun writing part of the process.
The first chapter in this epic tale.
So as you were going through and looking at previous interactive specials that were done in the past, did you have people or resources that you could talk to who had gone through the process before you?
We had quite a few people that we talked to in the beginning, and we basically tried to talk to anyone who had any experience, because we wanted to avoid as many mistakes along the way, because we had to build this whole pipeline for an interactive experience, which at a size that no one had attempted before. So we met up with people from Bandersnatch and a lot of other like smaller animated ones as well, where we just tried to get the lowdown on anything and everything that could go wrong along the way, so we could try and, okay, how can we try and prepare for this? I mean, obviously there'll be things, because the scale that we're attempting, it hasn't been tried before with animation, but yeah.
Yeah, we definitely like had a lot of great support from Netflix in that regard. Like our immediate executive that was brought on to this project, Julius Harper, had a lot of experience with interactive projects, so he was like super helpful in getting us set up with this and really guiding us along the way. We had our branching narrative consultants, like we had 2 that were brought in kind of from outside the studio, and also Juan from Los Gatos, to like
part of
Netflix, and the whole team in Los Gatos were fantastically supportive throughout the entire process.
Yeah, so obviously they had done all of the stuff that came before us, so they shared all of their experience and all of their, okay, we we've updated these bits along the way, which was also interesting to work on something where the tech side evolved as we were doing it. So something that was impossible in the beginning became possible half a year later, which was exciting because all of a sudden, everything's a bit faster and runs a bit smoother, and then we could do things that we were dreaming about in the beginning, but we didn't know if it was actually going to happen.
And before we continue on with the slides, I was just curious, were there creative choices that you would not have been able to make in a linear format?
That's a good question.
I think there were, because it's basically, this is an opportunity to use all of those ideas that you never really get a chance to explore, because on a normal linear storytelling, you beat out your idea and then you're like, okay, but I do have this silly idea, but maybe it's just a bit too out there. But in this one, we really made room for some things that would have never happened.
There's so much you have to sacrifice when you're doing like a regular linear thing, because you have to focus all the elements towards a story and everything that you're trying to tell in the most efficient kind of way. So there's so much kind of baggage that you just throw on the cutting room floor, which is obviously the right thing to do. But with something like this, like Rikke says, it allowed us, because we had these different paths going, and they still had to serve the story, but we could take that story in different directions depending on which way we were going. So it did allow us to hold on to more stuff, and just the writing process in that regard, because of that, was really, really fun.
Yeah, it really became, I think, for both of us, our favorite writing experience of anything that we have been lucky enough to make because of that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So I was curious, I see the slide with the art and design, so I wanted to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about We Lost Our Humans' animation style and some of the animation techniques used on the special?
Sure. So, this is the four main characters. We have Human, Pudding the cat, Ham the dog, and IT, who is a little robot who you'll find out more about when the project comes out and you can follow the story. But so it was animated in Harmony by Jamfield in Ottawa, who we used Harmony before on Pinky Malinky, again with Jamfield. So it was a software that we were aware of kind of how to work with, certainly in regards to animation and design, and trying to get the characters built and designed in a way that would make sense for that particular software. And we also, like on Pinky, we used After Effects for compositing. On this one, we used Fusion, which I believe is connected in with Harmony as well. So we had quite a heavy compositing pass on this to try and, like the characters, as you can see, are two-dimensional, although there is some shading on there to give them a bit more kind of volume. But the backgrounds and environments and everything like that, we really pushed depth, and we were using kind of a lot of depth of field. Even though they're 2D, we were doing a lot of stuff with the compositing to try and create that depth, to create that illusion of a real kind of proper space in there, just to make it feel kind of more cinematic, more epic, and have those characters really kind of pop.
In animation style, it definitely has similarities to Pinky, where it has that nice, snappy, coast-to-coast feel, but this is probably like the 2.0 version of it, where it's just like a little bit more, again, we were working within the budget, but we were still trying to really push it, and how can we get this a little more feature-like without it being, it's not like it still has that, the snappy animation that we both really like, and it just suits the design and it suits the program we were making it in, to like spend more time on the acting, like the facial expressions, and like less subtle or less floaty movement of the body.
Because like Rikke said, we did want to push this more cinematic, because Pinky Malinky was more of a sitcom style, like kind of mockumentary, had that kind of reality show element to it. So it was a bit more kind of cartoony, poppy, that kind of stuff. With this one, although it still has that quality to the animation, we wanted the overall feel to feel more epic, more cinematic, which goes across animation and design, really. So yeah, these are just some examples of the character design from the kind of model packs that we prepared and sent on to Jamfield for them to then build the characters from. We can't show you too much because it's not out yet. So we just kind of selected a handful of things that we thought would be fun to take a look at.
Bit of a teaser.
Yeah.
Now.
There's Human, which looks incredibly hard to animate a character like that. So I'm glad I wasn't doing it. But
they did a really amazing job.
Jamfield did a fantastic job. There's a little picture of the three of them together. So yeah, unfortunately, those are the only designs we can show you for now. Look forward
well,
to
I think those are fantastic. I mean, I think one of the things I really like about simpler characters with very geometric, stylized designs is it also makes it a little bit easier sometimes to focus on the animation. There are cases where, like, you see, screenshots from certain series where the characters are very detailed, but there might not always be as much movement. And I think that if you are sort of have a triangle between complexity, animation, and cost, it's important to find a good balance between those three. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's many things you have to take into consideration. I mean, one of them is just pure storytelling. You want the characters to be clearly communicating emotions and acting, and nothing cluttering that up with design or whatever. And then, you have to take in the practical consideration as well, of like production costs. So if it is an incredibly complex character, it's going to take a lot longer to not only animate but to build as well.
And like, if you don't have the budget to do it justice, then you should rethink what that design looks like.
So it's balancing the creative choices along with the production cost as well, which is, it's always a fun challenge. I mean, we love doing that kind of thing.
It's just a part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You just constantly have to troubleshoot every stage.
Well, I mean, Chris, as you were saying too, one of the benefits of having a more simple character is that it's also easier to read. There's clarity with simplicity. Yeah, definitely. And it's a balance as well, because sometimes you want subtlety in the acting, which sometimes, if you have a very, very basic, very simple looking character, you can lose some of the subtlety in the acting. So it's kind of knowing when to bring in that extra little detail, like the extra little line around the eye or whatever it is, that just going to help sell a particular expression. But kind of balancing that in there so it feels still in style and it doesn't suddenly pop and might become weird, unless that's obviously the point of the pose or whatever. So you had an opportunity to talk a little bit about the development process, but how did the project come about, and what was it like to pitch this? So,
I mean, it was at the best possible time, really, because we were lucky that we were pitching right when Netflix were buying a lot of interesting, fun projects. So it was a lot of it was timing, which is always what it is with pitching. It was within that first year of kind of the Netflix studio in Hollywood, really, happening, the animation studio. So they were actively looking for a lot of very different kind of interesting projects. And we knew a few people that were over there who we'd worked with in the past at Nickelodeon when we were doing Pinky Malinky. And we were aware that they were also looking for interactive stuff. So like I said before, we had a few different ideas, but I think we went in there with like maybe 7 different. It was 5. Yeah, 3 regular ones and 2 interactive. But these 2 interactives weren't actually in our pitch deck until maybe 4 days before we went in there, because then we were like, that's when we were told that, they are actively looking for that, so you should definitely. This makes us sound like we don't really try very hard. We do put a lot of effort into this. It's not like, all right, we've got 4 days, let's come up with something. No, I mean, we had already had the idea, but we weren't sure if we should put it in there. So that was like the point where the reshuffle of the pitch. I would like to contrast that with Pinky Malinky, just so people know that it doesn't come that easy. Just like, I mean, we first started working on Pinky Malinky like 2005, 2006 maybe, and that didn't get greenlit until 2015. So No, I'm only saying it because it's a fun story, but it's certainly...
We've been through the hard stuff as well as this one. This one flowed a little bit easier, which was kind of nice.
It was a lucky time for us and a lot of other people who got the opportunity to make their dream projects.
Exactly. I mean,
I don't think...
It was a really good time.
All of us who got to be part of that studio at that time are grateful for that.
Absolutely.
So as artists with experience in television animation for streaming, how was the experience of working on an interactive special different?
So there's quite a few different things, stuff that you have to approach differently. And a lot of it we kind of discovered as we were going along, which was kind of scary but fun at the same time. I mean, just practical things like, for example, storyboarding and animatics, like that side of it, when you take the storyboards into animatics and then we are viewing the animatics, there's so much, because this is kind of built up of lots of different segments, because it's interactive, you're building up all of these segments that connect in different ways depending on which paths you're going. So, for example, if you finish one storyboard sequence that finishes with a choice point that can go in many different directions, you have to make sure that all of those other segments that you're going into, just from a filmmaking point of view, that it helps up, like the shot you're cutting from to the next shot kind of works together, as well as kind of following the narrative flow. So you had to check that, obviously, during the storyboard phase, but you also had to be double-checking that during animatic. So it just made...
It's very time-consuming.
Yeah, that part of the process was a lot longer. It took a lot longer than we kind of...
We thought we had been quite conservative with, giving ourselves quite a lot of time to do that, and we realized that I think that was the point in the whole production. That was the thing we underestimated the most.
Yeah,
how long that would take to do all of that checking.
And it's not because anyone was doing anything wrong. It was
just just simple.
Yeah,
like,
you had to double check
hookups
and stuff like that. So it just took a lot longer than we thought.
Because there's no shortcut. You have to sit through it. You have to watch it. It's just hours in front of the screen, and you can't not do that. Well, you can, but then you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing things like making sure that character poses hook up from one scene to the next get a little bit more complicated when there are branching scenes.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely. And also just going from a mid shot to a mid shot where you thought, oh, we're going to be fine because we're going to this close up. And then later on, it's like, no, but on the other path, we're going from this shot to something really similar, and that doesn't work at all.
Because, I mean, not only do you have sometimes like a singular path that then branches out into many different directions, sometimes it works the other way where you're coming from lots of different directions into one path. So you're checking hookups going out, you're checking hookups going in. You kind of, there's a lot of checking all the way across.
We did have some where we thought we were being so super smart, and we had built in these little like re-engagement things where, oh, this character can mention like the first, second, third, whatever, fifth time you go through, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh no, that means we have 8 things coming into one thing. So we didn't feel so smart when we figured it out.
Because, I mean,
we really shot ourselves in the foot.
Something which is really fun in these projects is like you can introduce like state-tracked elements. Like, for example, if a character
picks up an item.
Yeah, you're given a choice to pick up a certain item, then that is tracked so that when you're further down the story, it will acknowledge that you made a choice to kind of pick up this item. So there's lots of elements like that, whether it's a piece of clothing that they're wearing, or the character said something, or they picked an item, or whatever it is. But that's when it kind of really explodes the
it's really it's really satisfying to do, and it's also but that's when it really adds hours for the animatic reviews, because all of a sudden.
But that's what you have to keep an eye on as well, because it
makes your brain hurt as you're set.
Like Ricky said, when we were doing the re-engagement side of it, there was some heavily state-tracked stuff that we were trying to pay off in that area, which meant you were then branching off into multiple different directions that then had to come together again. But because it was such a small state-tracked element, it had to be kind of handled in post in a different way, which made our post minutes explode into, rather than like hundreds of minutes, it was going to be like thousands of minutes. So we kind of had to, at that point, like troubleshoot, how do we kind of still achieve what we creatively want, but make sure we're not spending as much money as it could have been.
Well, and as many years.
Yeah, exactly.
Be like 120 by the time we're done.
Yeah. So yeah, that was fun. But I mean, that's what was kind of exciting about it. I mean,
I think the challenge was almost what we enjoyed the most about it, because I don't know. I think we're both a bit suckers for punishment when it comes to. We just want to try out something new and different. And I feel like we did the same with Pinky, and now this was like, okay, we've never done that before, so I'm sure that'll be fine.
And should mention at this point as well, like Manny Beale, who is our line producer throughout all of this, who was also worked with us on Pinky Malinky. Yeah. So she was alongside us, kind of troubleshooting all of this as well. So she making
our schedule work.
Yeah, exactly. Like
pulling her hair out.
She definitely
we came up with a new idea.
She helped us overcome a lot of these challenges from a production perspective as well.
Was it the challenge that really appealed to you about the interactive format? Like, what is it that really brought you into saying, hey, we really want to pitch this?
I mean, I always loved those books. So the ideas of doing something like that felt a bit like, yeah, this would be really cool to get the chance to do that.
I mean, yeah, we both, from being kids, we both kind of been into those like fighting fantasy, choosing adventure books. We both played Dungeons and Dragons when we were younger. So
lots of role-playing games, which also has a little bit of a feel of that.
Yeah, and as well as video games as well. So there's always been that element of interactive in a lot of the media that we've kind of grown up using. And to be honest, like choosing on adventure stuff, like that kind of thing, I think it's something as a content creator, and I mean, I've talked to other people who work in animation as well, it's something that's always been in people's minds. It's just the technology has never been there. So conceptually, the choose your own adventure in animation is not that new. It's just that now the technology is actually there to make it happen. And I mean, that's why the heroes of this whole thing are basically like the tech people in Netflix who really kind of nailed this down, made it work, and gave creators like us a platform to actually be able to do this. So I think it's always been something that has been there for us. We just never really knew it was possible.
Yeah, I think they're definitely like. I think like digital platforms have definitely created opportunities to make this sort of storytelling more accessible. Like you mentioned with the fighting fantasy novels, they were recently readapted into iPhone games with the Sorcery series, which is excellent. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. But in your view, what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities presented by interactive storytelling?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the challenge, an attractive challenge, I kind of took on board with this one, was that myself and Rikke, I think with everything that we do, it's always character driven. We always love having very kind of character driven stories. And I think the challenge with interactivity was often the reader, the person who's interactive, kind of takes on the role of that character. So it's almost like you're giving them an empty shell to take on that role and kind of travel through the story. So the challenge with this was like, I mean, Pudding and Ham are very, very rounded characters. So it's that challenge of allowing the audience to interact with them, but interact with a character that already has a personality.
Staying true to who they are throughout all these different branches as you go through the story.
So he's trying to make sure that is a rewarding experience, the fact that you feel like you are interacting with a character even though that character has a mind of its own, and making sure that the choices are believable to the personality that we've set up for that character as well. So although the choices are very, very different, it's never something that would feel weird for that character to do. It always kind of makes sense and believable. I think that was definitely, for me, the most attractive challenge to begin with.
Yeah, that was a big worry in the beginning when we started doing this, because it's like, okay, if we want some really big, significant branches, how can we stay true to it?
Yeah, and true to the characters. Yeah.
Because we don't want to just have this split personality.
Yeah, and you don't want a character that it feels like their personality is kind of empty and one note. You want to give a lot of levels to who they are.
Yeah, it's like you don't want, I mean, it's not a game. It's a different thing. It's like this.
What is it then?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've always struggled as to, because sometimes you say like an audience,
thing,
like a viewer or a player.
Experience.
Yeah, it's basically like an experience.
It's an interactive experience.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, it's just figuring out a lot of new stuff, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting part of it too, where that this format is so fresh that the language hasn't entirely caught on of like what are you doing interacting with interactive fiction. And I mean, even like interactive fiction as a term too refers to like the sort of text stories. So it is an interactive video? Like, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's kind of what makes it exciting, because it hasn't fully been pigeonholed.
Yeah.
So it gives you a bit of freedom to kind of take it in different directions.
I can't wait for people to argue over that either. It's going to be great. I feel like this is just ripe for people arguing. Cats and dogs. What is it?
What is it? Why is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I really enjoy is that Pud and Ham both have food names. I find that really amusing with pets. Was the process of naming these characters challenging or tricky?
I think that's always a tricky thing, no matter what you're doing when it comes to...
Yeah, we always tend to go for silly names.
But I mean, even with Pinky, because that went through a lot of evolution through development, like characters, apart from Pinky himself, a lot of the other characters, their names
There's also a lot of food-based things.
Yeah.
If it's not the name that's food, then the character itself is a sausage.
But it is one of those things, like when you're creating or writing anything, there is a process of like trying out different names, seeing what sticks, seeing what suits the character, and the more you get to know the character, you kind of figure out what actually works for them.
And then, to be honest, a lot of it is the silly things that we call our own cats.
Yeah, there is that as well.
Yeah.
And Ham the dog was actually named after Matt Lazell, had a cat called Ham Sandwich. Matt Lazell is the creator of Battle Kitty on Netflix, another interactive show.
Yeah.
But yeah, his cat was called Ham Sandwich, so we ended up stealing that and calling our dog Ham.
I did ask him first.
We asked him.
I was like, do you mind if we call our little dog Ham? And he was like, oh, no, that'd be nice.
I think that's kind of a nice homage too.
Yeah.
Or a nod, or I think it's kind of a nice reference. I just realized that I asked you all these questions.
Yeah, there's a couple of Easter eggs in there, which in the whole show, which do nod to other creators and shows at Netflix as well. So that's something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, it just occurred to me. I asked you all these questions about the production, and I know there's a lot that you can't say in terms of story. But is there like an overview you can give for our viewers about like the premise of the interactive special and its characters?
So, I guess, like we said before, it's basically like Pudding and Ham, who find themselves on this adventure to try and find their human, because they woke up that human has disappeared, and they soon discover that all humans have completely disappeared from the planet, and just trying to figure out how to not spoil anything. But basically, they go out into the big wide world to try and find their human and discover that the world is not how it used to be, which kind of takes them into kind of a crazy multi-dimensional epic adventure along many different paths.
Yeah, it's definitely not just a straight up, oh, we're looking through our world. It's looking through interesting.
We wanted
places.
to try and, because obviously it's a branching narrative thing, it has many paths, so you have simultaneous stories, if you like. So we wanted to try and actually get that into the narrative itself. So it is multi-dimensional. It's going across space and time, if you like. So, and there's a lot of kind of...
It's all connected.
It's all connected. There's kind of interweaving elements. They might even meet different versions of themselves from different times, all of that kind of thing. So it's sort of connected to how the whole branching, crazy noodle path of Choose Your Own Adventure happens as well.
Yeah, it's really playing with that map and just getting the most out of it.
Yeah.
To the breaking point.
Yeah, exactly.
How many minutes can we squeeze out of this thing?
Yeah.
When we were talking earlier, you mentioned that you had a chance to do some hands-on work on this production in addition to producing and writing. What were some of the favorite moments that you got to be part of in terms of the production side of it?
Oh, there's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we
were involved in everything.
Yeah, because we were directing the whole thing, so we were connected to every single part of the process. I mean, making something like this, whether it's interactive or linear, it's always super fun because of the crew that you get to work with. So all across, like from writing, storyboard, design, animatics, like working with all of these fantastically talented people to get them to kind of get involved, bring their own voice, bring their talent to the project and kind of plus it in a way that you couldn't even imagine. That's so rewarding, like getting to build that team and just seeing the kind of results.
I mean, the first board pitches is always so exciting when everything starts turning into something that you can actually see because you've had the writing for so long. So when you start seeing these pitches and you're like, oh yeah, this is what the apartment looks like, this is what they look like, this is what they feel like when they're moving around and how big and crazy it gets, that's always super fun.
Yeah. And I mean, we are control freaks with a lot of stuff that we do, so we couldn't help but get stuck into things like storyboarding as well. And I was art directing, so I was obviously involved in some of the design stuff. And I mean, we were both doing design stuff on the conceptual stage as well. But I mean, again, we had such a fantastic team, but thankfully we could allow people to just go off and do their own stuff as well. I had Elaine Wu and Sue Moon, who were my two design supervisors, who were kind of helping me on the art direction side of it also.
Yeah, they came up with so much incredible stuff.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's all about, like getting everyone to pitch in and just getting all these talented people to, I mean, we all build it together. And then I guess it's up to us to kind of connect the dots.
And then, I mean, beyond that, the other elements that are always super exciting is when you're building the cast, like the people that are doing the voices and everything. Like, I mean, for example, with Pudding the Cat, we knew exactly who we wanted for that from day one. Like, we wrote that character for Ben Schwartz, because we'd worked with him before in Pinky Malinky, and then we were like, oh, I hope we get him, because if we don't, we're kind of screwed. But I mean, thankfully, like, you bumped into him in a cafe.
Yeah, by accident, and I was like, do you want to come into Netflix and see what we're doing? And so he came in, and we basically pitched him the whole, like, the room we showed you before.
And allowed him to make the choices along the way.
Yeah, so we let him play the experience, and then we pitched him through the whole thing. And he thought it was really cool. He loves animation. He's really into games. And
yeah, so I mean, thankfully he came on board, which was fantastic. And then we had Ayo Adeberi, who played Han.
Yeah,
who's
just so funny.
Yeah, great actor, comedian.
And they make such a good team, even though they have never actually met, because COVID happened, so we never got to do any recordings together.
Yeah, I mean, that is the other thing, like COVID lockdown hit this production at the kind of the busiest point in production. Like, we were just about to get our design crew on board, like storyboards were in full flow, animatics, and it was, everything suddenly was thrown into lockdown. And again, like, Netflix was super, super supportive in getting everyone set up and keeping the production running. So we were definitely incredibly grateful with that. So it was actually, once we got back on our feet in lockdown, it was quite a smooth production, even though everything was remote, like even in the chords. Like,
yeah, I mean, obviously it was a bit scary in the beginning, and everyone was feeling that what's happening, the world is ending. There
was one record where Ben was in like those portable clothes things where you hang clothes on a rail, like you see backstage in a theater or whatever. He had one of those in his house that I think he surrounded himself with clothes to try and dampen the sound. So he was kind of hidden in this little den that he created to do the record. But it still worked really well.
I mean, I think of all the home records that we did, 99% of the lines were usable.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
We made it work somehow.
And then, I mean, another element that was also super exciting was the music. It's always great to kind of see everything come to life when you have the music kind of thrown on there too. And Dave Newby, who we used on Pinky Malinky as well, we brought him on board for this one because it was a great experience working with Dave on Pinky, and also he comes from a video game background, so he kind of has knowledge of that kind of side of things, which was obviously definitely very helpful for this too.
I mean, some of the music he's made for this is just that's when you're glad you're working from home, so you can switch your camera off and have a little cry.
It's so good. We kind of creatively went in a very different direction for Pinky, for this one than Pinky, because Pinky was, again, it was more of a sitcom, reality show, so it was kind of more poppy, kind of funky, kind of fun.
Yeah, it was specific in its own way.
Exactly. So this one we wanted to push in a more cinematic, epic direction, so there's more kind of bigger orchestral sounds and really to kind of help just amp up everything. So yeah, I'm excited for everyone to hear the work that he's done on that, and just to kind of see and hear the work that everyone's done on this project.
Not long.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I mean, there are tons of stories about productions that had to adapt to suddenly everybody's remote, and we don't really know what's happening. Did you find it was sort of surreal to be telling the story about how all the humans disappeared right at the start of the pandemic?
A little bit. It was like, did we do this? Is this our fault? Yeah, that was like, oh, that couldn't have been more appropriate.
Yeah. You almost wish that it would have come out during that period.
Yeah.
It would have felt very topical. Yeah. But it's hard to be topical in animation. So it takes so long to do.
Yeah, can everyone just hold that thought for 2 years while we finish this?
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to ask if you had advice for other artists who are interested in interactive animation.
I guess it's a tough one because you can get into that side of things from so many different angles.
Yeah. I don't know if jump into it is good advice, but I really would advise people to jump into it, but also seek advice from people who have experience.
Yeah, I mean, our experience with interactive is currently just this project, so I think there's probably, when it comes to, say, interactive video games, some people would have better knowledge than we do. But I mean, I would say video games, interactive side of things, like there's so much that is happening in the industry. Like the video game industry is huge.
I mean, if you are going to attempt to write an interactive story, my one bit of advice that we have learned from doing this is put it up on a wall so you can see it, because that was the one thing that really worked out well. But don't put it in the computer too soon where you lose the overview. Like literally put it up on the wall, do your little murder wall and connect everything, and just, yeah, that's a really good way to like keep, just to check it.
I think, I mean, advice for artists that are just getting into the industry and are interested in interactive things and like video games and stuff like that, I would say, I wouldn't just look at that. I think it's great if you want to do that, but make sure that you have the skill set to also be kind of working in linear formats as well. Like the more that you can spread your skill set across like regular animation, video games, like interactive, even illustration or whatever it is, I think the more likely you are to kind of stay in work, because like industries go through cycles of kind of being busy or work being hard to find. So I think the more that you can kind of
versatile.
Yeah, be versatile like that, the better. And also it's like, I mean, yeah, this is an interactive project, but we needed to have linear traditional storytelling skills to be able to do it.
It's like we talked about in the beginning, that we wouldn't have had anything if we hadn't done our linear story first.
Yeah, you need the basic fundamentals to be able to do anything, whether it's drawing, storytelling, whatever, and then you can apply those to lots of different kinds of formats.
Did you find the process of like paring down and because you mentioned that there were elements of the like big post-it board that were just maybe not within the scope of the project. Did you find that like paring it down was a difficult process?
It was easier than expected, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, because we did have to more or less cut it in half.
Yeah.
But first of all, we were kind of wearing two different hats when we were doing this. You have like your creative hat on of like, oh yeah, let's keep the stuff that we love and some of the stuff that we're not as bothered about with the move. But there's also your production hat, where it's like, all right, there's a huge sequence here in a stadium with a crowd of 1,000 people. Let's cut that, because that's going to be incredibly expensive. And we had one sequence where it was almost like a Mario Kart style thing through a city, which would have been really, really fun, but that would have been insane from a production standpoint.
Let's save this one for when we have more money.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a bit of both, like creatively and just from a budgetary standpoint, kind of making those choices. And it wasn't as difficult as we thought it was going to be.
I think we knew that we had had the opportunity to be very creative and really explode the project and go as big as we dreamt of. So to be honest, there was some, looking through it, there was stuff that was like, okay, this is not the best idea in the world.
Exactly.
So we can, we can kill it without it being the end of the world.
So we are almost out of time. I wanted to ask, where can our viewers go to learn more about We Lost Our Human and find more about your work?
So, I mean, the project is coming out early next year, so we haven't been posting too much about it. There's not a great deal out there right now, but I think over the coming months, certainly myself and Rikke on our Instagram, I'm sure we'll be posting more about it. And also, we're going to be encouraging all the artists and people that worked on the project to also be kind of posting designs they did from the project, and hopefully there'll be a trailer coming out in the new year.
Which we will definitely share as soon as we get our hands on it.
So I guess the first place to pop to would be our Instagram. We just put our names into the search engine and just find us on Instagram and go from there.
And of course, your other show, Pinky Malinky, is currently available to stream on Netflix. It is awesome. Our viewers should check it out. I think what you're able to do with that format was really, really delightful.
Thank you.
So I want to say, so Rikke, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank all of the artists and animators who tuned in for this discussion. As Rikke and Chris mentioned, We Lost Our Human premieres on Netflix in 2023. And if anyone wants to try their hand at storyboarding scenes for an interactive project, artists can download a fully featured 21-day trial of Storyboard Pro from our website at toonboom.com. And don't miss our stream on Thursday for the premiere of Wacom's Animation Dance Party, hosted by Mike Morris. Thank you all for watching, and be sure to tune in next time.
Thank you.